All right, boys. We are back at the Sports Sense podcast. We got Ross, we got Reese, and today we're talking about Lake Placid. It's a downhill, awesome course, really cool to watch. Kind of like different than a lot of the courses that we've seen this year. Some tech sections, some more flowy sections. Just overall, really, really well built though. I think this was an awesome course to watch everyone race on, and it was a little bit different than what we're used to. Guys, what do you think of the weekend? Like, what did you think overall? Like, how did Lake Placid deliver? Like, what do you think, Reese?
I would say in a short answer, absolutely delivered. It was super sick. It was, I think, a couple things, but number one, that was some of the tightest racing we've seen, I think, all season in terms of it's all been super tight, but with like splits switching back and forth and stuff like that. So it's been really cool. And I feel like a lot of the races prior, we had someone who didn't qualify well. So it was like not boring, but then it was just like red, 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 red. And then someone at the end would do something crazy. But for the middle of the race was like less climactic, I suppose. But this was one that every rider at each run was like red, green, green, red, red, green, and there was time made up top, time made up bottom. So it was a very cool track, and I think that type of racing is a testament to the course where, if people are making up significant seconds in different sectors, I believe every split had a different winner. That's a cool course because it lends to a lot of different skill sets.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think as well, I mean, just the aesthetics, it just looks so beautiful as well with the weather. And I love how this year, I would have to say, is probably the best year for a complete diversity of courses, conditions, everything. So it truly is going to establish who is the best downhill racer on the planet this season with how changeable it is. And it was interesting to hear like how the course broke down with this week. It sounded like a lot of sand, which didn't look like that's what the surface would be on like the preview videos, but I imagine just that track surface, that kind of sandy soft dirt, and then like kind of a harder base with the boulders in there would have been really hard.
And at the start of the weekend, we saw a bunch of track or course previews that just looked like beautiful, pristine loam. And then as the weekend progressed, it just got completely blown out. And then up until race day, when it looked like sand and dust and that kind of like slippery surface. So what can you guys say about like, with your experience of riding with track evolution like that throughout the week? What's going through your head like, day by day? Are you taking it day by day, or are you, going, we know it's going to get a little bit different? How are you going to approach the week, and kind of how you might, you know, adapt to this changing track surface?
Go for it, Ross.
I think, I mean, obviously, whenever you got a brand new track, I mean, probably the first two runs that you do on it from a fun perspective are just the best. Your suspension feels dialed because the ground is soft, but it's when the holes come out and they get deeper that it becomes really tough. So the fact that probably would have changed every run with that many riders going down. And it seemed to me like the challenge there was knowing when to be quite sort of deliberate with when you're pushing into the bite, but knowing when to kind of just be quite sort of have a lot of finesse. There was quite a cool variety of the sort of frequency of inputs that the riders seem to be making. And especially like that gap earlier on where Loris had a bit of a whoopsie. Like that gap they were doing there looked like pretty gnarly, that you're guaranteeing hopping into what looked like quite a squarish compression. But the way that Armory did it and the way that Max Auron did it, especially, it's just mind blowing how smooth they were able to make that look.
Yeah, agreed. And I feel like there's another piece with that, which is the degradation, but it was also probably the widest course we've seen this season as well. So like compounding factors of like hard enough to figure out a track where things are gonna degrade and blow out, and you're gonna kind of try to find lines within your line or sneaky ones to avoid the holes. But then add at every corner, there's three options. So you've got to memorize those as well. So a lot of the work we were doing with our crew that were over there, some of the juniors, was being quite decisive. Like, it's gonna blow out. It's sand. You know it's gonna blow out. So try to be decisive with your decision making and really focus on memorizing the track. And then we can look at managing the degradation. But first you got to know it so then you can change it and adapt to it first. If you're constantly worrying about, oh, I shouldn't go here or shouldn't go here because that might blow out or that might blow out, you then just end up with too many decisions instead of going, this is where I'm going. And if that does then get really bad, I can change it. So just a bit of that tactical approach to making those line choices and those line decisions.
So is hold on. I'm just like I just skipped for a sec. I have a question. Okay, we're good. So is this like decision making on the day? Are you changing lines as the week goes on? Are you saying like, well, that line's completely blown out, it's gonna be slower now? Or are you like just being decisive, like and how are you approaching that?
I think both. Some riders will deal with it better than others, the changes. I mean, Jackson at Hardline was a hilarious one, and he apparently does this all the time, but, saw a line on the live broadcast and was like, that's the line? Okay, I'm going to do it. I haven't even tried it in practice. I'm just going to go do it. So some people at that level of confidence that they can do it, particularly with the junior racers whose minds tend to run away from them sometimes. Everyone's a little different, but I try to err on the side of let's make committed decisions and be decisive and stick to those lines. The ones that feel the best for you or most confident for you. And part of that is training the mental game of not getting caught up in what everyone else is doing and racing your race, but also then getting up to speed quick enough to make a quali. Because the other thing is, like, yet 8 runs or 7 runs prior to your quali as a junior, and like that's not that many laps to memorize a course, so like just be decisive, fix that, and then you can fine tune it between quali and final if you need to make some changes.
Yeah, and we saw so sportsense, the sportsense app, Canyon uses it pretty extensively. We work with them, and they're throughout the week really dialing in the line choice. And so using the app or using some sort of video analysis, they're able to sort of like pinpoint like which lines are going to be fastest through the week, and that track keeps evolving. And so Reese, that's great. Like it's really cool to hear like how that might actually break down like in the actual week, and it's like just shows how important it is to like keep analyzing those lines, like keep making those changes. And like Jackson just looking at a video and going like, from when he's sitting at the top, going like, yeah, that's the change you have to make right now, and that's going to be faster. It's when you see it on video, you're really able to make that clear decision as to where to go.
Yeah, and I think the coolest part about those side by sides that we've seen is you can put someone side by side with someone else and they ride the same line and then ride a different line, and one might be better for one individual than the other. The fastest line for Ross might not be the fastest line for me. Different size people, different skill sets. So, it's amazing technology because they can also get reinforced that, you actually don't need to change your line. The one you're doing is great for you because you ride that line faster than you ride this line. So comparing others, but also comparing your own riding in a section is where I've found that thing to be so valuable.
When looking at the like track and kind of going back to track evolution a little bit here, like hard pack versus it being sandy and like how things have changed over the week. Like Ross, can you comment on what it's like to actually ride on that like that slippery of a surface?
It's interesting because I think especially stuff like cornering, a lot of times we might be thinking when the surface is quite firm, trying to really be positive, a bit more forward on the bike, to ensure that the front end really connects to be able to then drive out of. But sometimes in that kind of sandy surface, that can be your downfall. And it was hard to tell, but in the live feed, there was a corner where Lucas Shaw actually kind of had his front end kind of wash on him. He managed to save it, and he didn't. I don't think he lost too much time, but that might have been the 0.7 right there. So if it's kind of like a really loose sandy surface, kind of you're hardwired to mostly be riding like more predictably firmer surfaces, even if it is loose. Sand is very different because it's quite granular and it does move, and it just feels almost bottomless at times. So that might have played a role there. So in that scenario, maybe if he had too much weight on the front, then that could have like resulted in that push of the front. So maybe even things like knowing that, dialing back the speed on approach to not have a spike in pressure at that critical moment could have been a bit of a game changer for him. But again, we weren't there, so we don't know exactly what that corner was like. I'm sure he could reflect on whether that was the case or not.
And I think what's really interesting to see, like from race to race, is this emergence or like this sort of, you can identify low friction riders. Like Benoit Coulon is another example. He's great in the wet, also great when it's that dry and that slippery. Reese, question for you: if you were to identify that like skill of the race, what would it be?
Mm. Yeah, I think this is always so hard because we're not there, but and it's so many things. But for me, it was pressure control, and specifically, I would go one deeper and just say managing tension. So there's so many forces of the trail coming at these riders, especially in that top half, but even in the bottom, and I think it was the deciding factor because look at Loic, like he didn't absorb that jump enough, went deep, or did he tag it? Either way, didn't manage pressure effectively, paced or went deep, lost a bunch of speed, lost a bunch of time, didn't win the race. We also saw the best of the best struggling. Like we saw Omri wash a front. We saw Luca make a big error. We saw Loris get kicked over the front. We saw so many of the world's best, most precise riders struggling. And for me, it was the continuation of the reason I say managing tension is you always would have had to have some tension through your arms and your legs to brace against those big holes, but then find the exact right amount to release that tension over the next thing so you don't get bucked or you don't get hung up. And if you didn't release that tension quick enough, you might slide out the front end. So that margin for error on how much to release pressure or tension from our body was a dial that was micro adjusting continuously throughout that track. And I think that's where like Luke did it so well. He had just the right amount of support. It didn't look like he was doing a lot when he was riding. And I think that's a testament to how precise he was with managing that pressure and managing that tension.
When those holes get really big, are riders reaching and then sort of absorbing it, or what's the body position? What's kind of the thought process there as they're going through those massive holes?
Feel this one, Ross?
Yeah. I think really with massive holes, I think like Reese was talking about, if you have a big hit and then you don't do enough of the managing of that force, then the next unweighting can really cost you. So I think the best way I can describe it is if you were to throw a baseball or a cricket ball wherever you live in the world, wherever you play, if you just have your hand out there and the ball just comes and hits you real hard, then it slaps. So I think the riders that did really well were the ones that were just kind of just have that just subtle small movements within their body to be able to manage those micro sort of adjustments in pressure. And that way you end up with a result of a rider like Max Alran, who just looks like he's just riding on a cloud every time he rides.
So with, we were talking about riders kind of being on the edge here. And with Loris, he had a huge moment, pretty scary. Reese, do you want to comment on that one?
Well, yeah, I think that there's a lot going on there. Obviously, Loris is fit and strong, and he's skillful enough to manage that section. I think it tells the story that, number one, how much that track was changing, because he's probably hit that hole or that hole just got that much deeper between last time and last time, and maybe the pressure required to brace or absorb it prior was half of what it was that time, and he just bottomed out and was very lucky not to go face first into that corner. But I do think it kind of lends to the strength conversation as well. Um, so being a stronger rider, you're going to have more capacity to adapt to like extreme forces or extreme situations. So I do think that that was a really big factor in that circumstance as well.
And Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I kind of heard, that gap that was being done was kind of got opened up that morning, and that's why I think Richie Rude had tried it, and that's why he couldn't race, because he kind of cased it and went forward. Cost my fancy team, unfortunately. I'll forgive you though, Richie. And but yeah, I think that like I alluded to before, when you're kind of hopping into that kind of like notchy square edge compression, there's a lot of unknowns. Even to Jackson, when he went through that, he had like a similar thing happen to what happened to Loris, where he got pitched onto the front wheel. But whether or not it's just a matter of centimeters of where their wheels were, or if Jackson just in that moment was able to just kind of round out that square edge through his absorption through his legs to save him a little bit more than Loris. It's hard to know. But then, you know, I was even saying to buddies I was watching with, you know, like someone like Omri, I was like, he could do something really gnarly there, because like, but he did it really smoothly. So, yeah, just the finer details are just incredible. But I think could be just in that moment, that finer detail of feeling the pressures. But then again, move over an inch, there might have just been a rock that had very square edge hit like a little bit over. So again, without being there, we don't know exactly, and we don't want to kind of like claim that Loris couldn't deal with it. But he could have just maybe overjumped it a tiny bit. And these details are just, that's why it's so awesome.
Yeah.
Unreal drama.
It's really a game of millimeters. Like, you break down how precise these guys have to be, and you know, that could have been a couple of millimeters different based off the trail, based off of where he landed, based off of what he thought he was riding into, that just sort of bucked him, because it looked like an unexpected reaction.
And he may have not ridden that section that fast before. It looked like one of those sections where the gap in isolation could have been really cool, but it's more the speed that then the gap put you into that next section of trail is what would have been wild.
Yeah. I think another really cool part about the top of the trail there was like, it seemed like really chunky and like tons of rocks and like tons of line choice, and you know, that was one type of trail that was within this entire race. And then lower down, we had these sections that, you know, people were actually losing time in areas that we aren't really used to seeing people lose time in. Like, you see those fast flowy sections and you're like, oh, clock's green, they're gonna stay green. But that one moment, like, you know, with Loic, he was on one and then kind of got caught up on that jump. Ross, like, you wanted to comment a little bit, I think, on what happened.
I think so I think he wasn't really on course, if I remember correctly, to go into the hot seat, but he was on course to, I think, at least give Jackson a run, or you know, he might have done enough if he greased that lower section to be able to just pip Jackson. But then I think he in an interview after race, he did say that he had never gone that fast into that feature before. So he didn't absorb it as much as he needed to. And he wasn't going for the triple, so he was doing the on-off. But in that moment, you just saw him land on that upslope, which would have robbed him a bunch of momentum. And then, of course, beyond that, the track wasn't really technical. It was more of a carrying your speed kind of thing. So although in that moment, it might have cost him like a tenth or two, the compounding effect of that momentum loss could have resulted in the like second and a half or 1.8 seconds he was back off the win. So I think there's that compounding sort of effect of a mistake like that can be really, really costly.
Speaking of things that, you know, might make the difference, what do you guys think of Reese Wilson's setup, riding a little bit more with his legs? Just saying that it's more like a moto, having that actual setup behind his seat. Reese, what do you think?
I think it's more like a Batmobile than a moto. I look, without being too polarizing, I thought it was goofy and didn't have a lot of purpose, if I'm being blunt about it. But my reason for that is just because, especially on a track like this, of all tracks where we've just discussed how much the bike moving underneath you is critical to success, having something to pinch your knees on, I don't think would have been a very effective tool. So I don't know. Reese Wilson is the superior Reese in this riding situation by a mile. So he definitely knows something I don't know. But from a coach's perspective, like I couldn't come up with a reason why it would be beneficial, other than maybe some clicks or something like that. So I don't know. What do you think, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, I might have to defend my fellow Scotsman here, but maybe not. But I think, I mean, he's a very proficient moto rider as well. So he's obviously trying to get inspiration from another discipline. I think the dynamic of a motorcycle versus a mountain bike very different, though, with the motorcycle being substantially heavier than the rider. So I think in that scenario, being able to grip the bike for stability has a lot of use. That said, in the mountain bike side of things, we as riders are heavier than the bike. So if we then sort of intentionally sort of lock ourselves in to be attached to the less stable object in this situation, I think there's only very specific situations where that might be helpful. I think he has said that he's thinking it could be helpful for situations where he wants to rest his hands or situations where he wants to be able to be more efficient. So I think it could have a very small, specific area of use. And, you know, who knows? Maybe in 5 years' time, everyone will be running them. And we'll see. We're going to be something, you're not going to go into a rock garden and then go, all right, let's clamp the bike here and hope for the best. I think that's definitely not going to happen.
Also, I was just gonna say it's true. Like maybe some of those motorways, like speed sections, to be able to clamp and the rack
hands more.
Wait, because there was like 10 seconds plus of that in the track. So
I think there's these, yeah, definitely being able to clamp under and those, that maybe it's just also this like familiarity, like this confidence sort of thing for Reese, where he's just like, he likes to feel like there's a moto underneath him, even though it's not the same thing exactly. And he, like, not to say that it didn't look a little bit, I thought it looked a little bit goofy. Honestly, I was like, what is going on here? Until the commentary was like, oh yeah, now like this is what he's doing it for, whatever. Did look like a bit like a Batmobile. But it was an interesting sort of thing to see.
He has been quoted as saying that one of the beauties of downhill mountain bike racing right now is there's literally zero barriers to innovation. It's not like F1 where there's actual regulations for certain things. Even in motocross in the US, there's a production rule where you can't have a prototype bike. So he's actually said like it's open season for anyone that wants to try and innovate for this kind of application. So he's like really diving headfirst in there.
What do we think like on that topic? Like what do we think might be some of the innovations? Like what are some things? Have you guys heard any rumblings of like innovations that might be coming out in the downhill world? And that's really cool to know that like there's almost no regulation, like anything goes.
the one we've seen a lot over here in Tasmania, because there's a cool company that's pushing it over here, and I think Richie runs one on his bike, and I believe Luke has one on his bike as well, which is a steering damper. The company here is called Patty Melon. From Jeremiah Bouvar's doing it, and it's super cool. So dampens the steering to help with like in a track like that with those like really square hits or like big impacts to help manage that overcorrection or oversteer, among other awesome reasons. So that's one we've seen lots over here that people are starting to adopt.
Yeah, no, I can't think off the top of my head. Maybe I'll just go and put some wings on my seat.
Maybe. Here's one, Ross. One side of your pedal is a flat pedal and the other side is a clip-in pedal.
I think, has that not been done?
Yeah, that's my joke. Worst invention.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50 shot. 50-50 shot if you get it, depending on the shoes you have on.
Yeah.
So within this race too, a couple of like sort of interesting features, like some of the flowy, like fun stuff towards the bottom of the course. And we had that shark fin at the end. And I was hoping that you guys could provide some insight. Let's start with you, Ross, on like what's the proper way.
Jumping.
But well, what's the proper way to like think about hitting those shark fins? Because there's one thing that you often see, like especially in the women's field, I'd say probably let's call it like I think it was 70% ish, seemed like they really nailed a shark fin. Whereas some, what would happen is like they'd be kicking their back wheel like away from the fin, so it kind of would move in the other direction. They'd land a little bit squirrely, and then
Yeah.
obviously manage it on the way down. But what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I think, well, when you're taking off that angle, I think probably that happened because the speed difference between a heavier rider or say the women's field and the men's field is enough where the men are coming in and they're not really having to pop. And when you pop off angled surf, like it kind of like projects you out. And then as the bike evens out through the inertia of the wheels, then it's kind of an overcorrection in some regards if they've had to pop a lot. I think for a lot of people maybe who haven't jumped off, say, wall rides or shark fin features, maybe one of the fears they have is, am I just going to land sideways? But I think like for those people who may be curious about that, is it doesn't really change much other than jumping off a straight jump because of the way that the physics of the wheel spinning works, which is quite reassuring.
Yeah. The simplest way I could put it is like, when you spin a basketball one way while you drop it and then it hit the ground and comes up spinning the other way. It's the same thing. I think a lot of times because riders are nervous of shark fins, they're not quite committed or they're rotated through a corner. So when they press in, they pop out and they end up rotated back the other way, which is why that back wheel steps out. So it's just the old whatever law of physics that is, second law of physics happening for you.
Yeah.
But is that it? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah, is it the third? I don't know. We're gonna get absolutely torn apart for this.
Surely, yeah, maybe it's the third, but that's the one.
Not if we segue out of it as quick as we can. Hey, keep going, Reese.
Yeah.
All right, exit. But to do it well is just the same as, like Ross said, a regular jump. But I would just say being committed to being centered to those forces. So leaning into the corner more rather than tipping the bike over and like twisting your hips way to the outside. If you can stay more square over top of your bike, you'll manage those forces evenly. So you'll come out of that shark fin evenly, and your wheel will do the rest and level you back out. So the moral of the story is just lean into it like a regular berm, and then you'll be good to go.
With so I actually have the clip there, and it's going to be like of the women kind of like back to back, like hitting the shark fin. Quick before, like I'll give you guys a second here to think about this. But were there any surprises? I'll edit this. Were there any surprises in the women's field? That's the question I'm going to ask. So we'll just. Do you want me to ask the question now? I can ask it, and then we can just go for it. Okay. So in the race here, were there any surprises in the women's field?
Maybe for me, Gracie. I feel like it seems like for whatever reason she's maybe like lost a little bit of that momentum in her sort of mojo that she had early on the season. You know, she's such a skilled rider. You know, she's unreal at jumping. And I thought she'd maybe be able to kind of navigate that upper section really well, and then be pretty solid on the jumping. Although perhaps maybe for sections of jump trail where you really got to add some pedals in between, then maybe that's not a strength of hers. Yeah, maybe that'd be my one.
Yeah, I think similarly, there was surprises and correction of surprises. Like Bali hasn't won a World Cup this season till now. So that was surprising that she hasn't won one yet. But
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, she won this track. But the biggest surprise for me was Sasha Ernest, the Kiwi. First year elite, younger. She's a bit smaller in stature on a very, very physical track in terms of strength. Maybe not so much in terms of conditioning, but for her to have done that run and then made up a bunch of her time in those bottom splits, being like a lighter rider. So just showing that precision and control for her to make up a bunch of that time was a very cool surprise.
Yeah, it was cool to see the value of the win, especially with all the drama that's going on with YT, and then to see just how excited the whole team was. But you know, in the women's field, it's a lot of really solid riding this weekend. In the men's field too, like, you know, was there anyone who really stood out? What do you think, Reese?
Yeah, it was a sick one. I think Henry Kiefer stand out for the consistency from him. He's still pretty young. Luke, a long time coming. You know, he's been working and working and working for so long and so meticulously that was really cool to see. Luke used to come and still does his off seasons at Medina down here in Tasmania, and seen him in the gym, seen him on training laps, and he just does everything at 11 at maximum effort, but also like concentration for a purpose. There's nothing that's not been thought through. You know, like whether it's like it's a rain day, we're gonna go do laps in the rain on the downhill bike, top to bottom, to get comfortable in these conditions because we know they're coming, or it's very specific training blocks to get stronger, or it's if his bed's pointing the right north and south to get the best sleep possible. You know, like he does it all. So to see him get that win for the first time, and maybe as a bit of an underdog or like a bit of a person people didn't think was going to do it, was pretty rad.
Yeah, I agree. And it actually kind of lends itself to something I've been thinking quite a lot about recently in terms of like, as from a coaching perspective, is that I kind of believe like you can't become sort of masterful or even an expert at anything unless you're at least somewhat obsessed by it for a period of time in your life. And this is something I think maybe that anyone out there who's looking to try and get better at biking can think about. Is like, am I obsessed by this? And it sounds to me like Luke Smith has basically become obsessed with his pursuit of trying to become an elite, like top downhill mountain bike racer. Is that kind of how you kind of see it?
He's as obsessed as they come, and I mean that as the highest compliment. You know, like 100%. Every decision would have that somehow behind it and considered in it. You know, like what he's eating, how he's sleeping, where he's going, where he's living, where he's training, what bikes he's riding, all of it. So I agree, and I think that was the proof in the pudding of that, right? Where maybe people who've been less obsessed, because there's probably varying degrees of obsession, where some skill could kind of win out a little bit, and you could win a race, and you could win a World Cup possibly, that direction. But or maybe people are just obsessed with the biking part. You know, there's like that's an easy lots of us are obsessed with riding our bikes, like I would put myself in that category. You know, whatever it is, 20 some years into it, and I still think about it all the time, every morning. I'm like, wow, how good that biking's the best. I'm definitely not as obsessed with like the nutrition required to perform at the high level. When someone's like, hey, do you want to have a beer and some pizza? And I'm like, yep, I do. That I'm not an obsession with performance anymore, right?
Yeah.
But that's a social obsession now. So,
Yeah.
I think that's the important part as well within that is like being obsessed with biking, so important. But we've been talking to our athletes a lot about like loving the process or like finding a way to love that process. That's sometimes harder. Like the mental process is exhausting and challenging, especially, the times when you're working on it are the times when it's hard. So kind of falling in love with that and getting that little bit of obsession with improving our mindset to become the best rider we can be nutritionally, physically, etc. So yeah, critical. And man, big high fives to Luke because that's someone who deserves it so much after all that effort.
Yeah, I think we all, sort of live our lives, at least to some degree, with this hope that we'll be judged on both our merit and our work ethic. And so for a guy like as dedicated as Luke to win a World Cup like this, a long time coming, that's awesome to see. And I think it's an inspiration for all of us. For these,
Yeah. Be interesting to see if he can turn that into like a new phase of his career, because he's always shown a lot of promise, but he's kind of been like a perennial sort of 10 to 20 ish sort of level rider. So it'd be interesting to see if he can like become a bit more like Henry Kiefer, where he's like right up there consistently.
on the note of kind of top finishes and what we're gonna see coming up here. So we have Jackson coming. You know, he needs to beat Loic by a certain amount of points. At Monster End here, and I think if he wins, Loic has to come fourth or worse. So this is setting up for a very dramatic, exciting finish to the season with the World Cup points. And you guys have any thoughts, any predictions, Reese, on what you think is going to happen here?
It's a good question. I have so many ideas. I think I'm like scared to say. I don't want to put something in the universe I can't take back. But I'm gonna call that neither of them are gonna win. And it's gonna come down to whoever's higher in the rankings. I do feel like is just pure based on nothing but what I've got in my stomach. I think Loic overdid it on the pressure, and he's now finally like he's put it on thinking like I do well with the pressure, and it started getting to him. He's not making critical errors, but he's last 2 races just not been able to find that Bruni pace. So to summarize my wall sitting, fence sitting,
Yeah.
I think Jackson's gonna get the overall from a mistake that Loic makes. He possibly could win. I'd love for him to win in Canada. I think that'd be sick. But I also just would love for anyone who's Canadian to win in Canada as well.
Yeah, I think Jackson's gonna win. I think he's gonna win the race. I think he's the chaser, so he doesn't lose anything if he tries to win. So he's in a situation where I might as well try and win the race. I think he seems to love being a bit of a showman. So, and he's won in there. I think he's won the last time they were there, that he was there, and he smoked them, I think, from memory. So he's won that the last time he raced it. The track, I think, suits him. There's a lot of square edge rocks there, and I think, he's not a heavy rider, as we've talked about a lot. So even if he does get a little bit offline, I think he's less likely to damage the bike. Loic more likely. And yeah, because he's on that chasing mentality. Like if he doesn't get it, but he was already in second place anyway, so he's not managing a lead. Whereas Loic is essentially managing a lead. If Loic's going to be in the weird headspace of like, do I go for the win, or do I like try and keep the bike alive, for example? So yeah, I think I'd rather be in Jackson's situation personally.
Yeah, I think the home field advantage too for him is like, even though it's across the country from where he's typically riding, I think it's still like that Canadian home field advantage. Yeah, last time he was there, he delivered. Yeah, I think my prediction is that Jackson's going to win it. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with Loic in terms of the points. And honestly, like, it's hard to make a prediction, but I would say Loic would be outside of the top four, so then Jackson would take the overall. But I totally agree with what you guys are saying there, where like I think that coming from behind, like the way that Jackson is going to be able to attack this race is going to make a huge difference, especially on home soil. But that being said, there might be some pressure for that home soil win. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that was a much better, more thought out version, Ross. I was just up here. I was just up here, Juju in the sky.
Yeah. I just feel like if you're chasing and you're within striking distance, you got nothing to lose, because if you go down trying, like, you were going to be in second anyway.
Yeah.
Possibly up the whole championship back. But he needs to put like a couple of places between him and Loic anyway. So it's not like it's a one place kind of scenario.
Yeah, he has to win, right? Like that's kind of what it is.
And if he comes fourth, then that only makes Loic's that means Loic can come like 15th probably.
But there's so many fun situations. Like this is going to be such an insane battle, because you've got like, imagine if, for example, Loic qualies way worse than what Jackson does or something, or like 10, and then he goes and puts down the fastest time, but then there's 10 people between, and Jackson's fifth, and then Jackson gets second, like just beat them, but then like the people in between are going to make the difference. There's so many crazy things that could ensue, or if like Loic's the last one at the top and Jackson's in third, and it's like, shit, I have to race to second place or third place time, like that'd be so hard to do, rather than just like, I'm gonna go race and win. So I feel like Loic probably still just has to go into it being like, I gotta try to win anyway. Like, I think if I was coaching Loic, that's what I would say to him. But like, doesn't matter, you have to win this route.
Yeah.
Unless Jackson goes first and eats shit, then just cruise down. That would be the only situation where it could.
Well, it's coming up. I'm excited to watch. So for next weekend, and we'll have another podcast after that. So thanks, guys. That's fun.
Is.
And that's
All right.
it.